what we think happened was that there was a planet that smashed into something and it broke open and its core was violently ejected. And then it traveled for 1 billion years into interstellar space, and then it ended up hitting the Earth. A Netflix crew came down and they actually shot a documentary while we were down there, and they're still working on it. But I think it's the first extrasolar thing ever recovered. The challenge is, why is it not disclosed at this point if they do exist? They could have killed bin Laden with a JDAM, and they're just taking DNA samples. Instead, they had a daring raid.
What do you think of all this alien stuff in the news? These anti-gravity propulsion systems, looking for solar.
All the alien stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about the alien stuff.
Oh God, people love aliens. All right, so I watched Avi Loeb on Joe Rogan. He was talking about Muamua, which is like this cigar-shaped alien vessel thingamabob that doesn't seem to be from our solar system, and it doesn't seem to be natural. And I was like, wow, this Avi guy is really cool. And he had something called the Galileo program. And so I reached out to Avi and I said, hey, I'm a big fan. And, I heard that you guys are doing some interesting stuff. Is there anything I can help you with? And Avi's like, well, we've been tracking this one heavenly body, this meteorite that hit Earth in 2014. And we think it's from a different solar system because we did all the mathematical calculations and we figured out where it landed, roughly speaking. And we think there might be a chance that it's not natural. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I said, where is it? And they said, well, we got some data from the Air Force, but they won't give us the right resolution, but we have enough resolution that we think it's like, roughly speaking, 50 miles off the coast of Papua New Guinea. I'm like, okay, so what do you want to do? And he's like, well, we want to set up a sea salvage operation and go and find it. And he's like, do you want to be part of it? I was like, do I? Fucking sea salvage operation off the coast of Papua New Guinea. This is going to be interesting. All right. So it was like a heist movie. We had assembled this team of people, and we had this weirdo Air Force guy that went with us, and then we had this old sea captain who was like 87 years old named Art Wright, who was like the Navy's Find It guy. He found like Russian nuclear subs and all these other things, and he fought in Vietnam as like a captain in Laos and all these other things. So, he's just seen some horrible shit his entire life. It was crusty as hell. And then we had this guy from New Zealand whose name will come to me in a second. He was like a famous submarine diver, and he was good friends with James Cameron, and he'd gone to the Titanic a dozen times and all these things. So it was a really eclectic crew of people. And I put in the money, and a Netflix crew came down, and they actually shot a documentary while we were down there, and they're still working on it. So we also had a documentary crew that was led by a really unique director who was special. And then obviously Avi himself and all the Harvard scientists. And we got on this ship called the Silver Star. So we planned out the whole expedition. We flew out on my jet to Manus Island, and then we took off. And what we had to do is we designed this sled with magnets on it, and basically we had it fall behind the ship and sink all the way to the seafloor, 6,000 feet down, and then we dragged it. It's kind of like Spaceballs when they're combing the desert. They're out there, so just drag this sled behind the ship for 8 hours. Then you bring the sled up in a very dramatic way, and then you take the sled off, and then we had to clean the magnets off to see if we can find fragments from the meteorite that was there. And we did this for 2 weeks. And it almost became like a horror movie because we were like tightly confined on the ship. And because of the schedule, we had a polyphasic sleep schedule. We were running 24 hours a day to save money. Nobody was sleeping properly, and it was very high stress, and things kept breaking and things kept going wrong. And like the experienced sailors like Art, he would be super stoic guy. Like every morning go down at 5 a.m. talking, morning, Captain, morning. And I was like, I heard you were a rowing champion, and at 87, like, how do you do that? And they all died. I mean, it's like, he's a man of few words, Art. But then, Avi, he decided to stop sleeping in his cabin and sleeping instead in the common areas. And then, oh God, we nearly killed him because he kept turning off the air conditioner. It was like 120 degrees with the humidity because we're right on the equator and it's the middle of fucking summer. And for some reason, I don't know why, in the common area, which is the only place we can hang out on the ship, anytime he was working his laptop, he would turn off the AC, and it would get just unbearably hot inside the area. So we go and turn it back on, then he would turn it off, turn it back on, then he would turn it off. And like the first few days, we're all fun. After about 2 weeks on a ship, not sleeping properly, that motion and everything, we're like, do you think the world would miss Avi Loeb if he fell off the ship? You know, but anyway, he was a good man, and what we ended up finding, because after we processed all the samples, we sent them over to Harvard and they analyzed them. That we found these spherules that are from a different solar system. So after analyzing them, they have about 5,000 times the concentration of beryllium, lanthanum, and uranium. And so what we think happened was that there was a planet that smashed into something and it broke open and its core was violently ejected. And then it traveled for 1 billion years into interstellar space and then it ended up hitting the Earth, which
Wow.
is the chance of that is like so infinitesimally small. And we wrote a paper about it and it got published. And they want to do another expedition because now that they found those fragments, they think they know where the big pieces are. And if you find a big piece, you can use different types of analysis to be able to actually definitively know what solar system that it actually came from. But because, when these things fall, they kind of like the outer skin melts. And as it melts, they drop down and they form spheres and then they sink to the bottom of the sea and they just sit in the abyssal terrain forever. But I think it's the first exosolar thing ever recovered from the seafloor. So I was really proud of that. We helped design the sled and did all these things. And we actually designed two sleds, and one of them that I designed they didn't use, and then the other one with the magnets they ended up using. The one that I helped design was a sleuth box, and because I used to gold pan and I used to do the sleuthing for gold on riverbeds. And what you do is you have these riffles in it, and it takes advantage of the density mismatch between the sediments and the gold. And so you're saying, well, if it's alien technology or it's like a heavy iron or something like that from a meteorite, it's probably really heavy. It's pretty dense. So if that material is really strong and really dense, then it's going to be much easier to sort it out from sand that's on the seabed, right? And so if you use a sleuth box, just like gold panning, you should be able to filter it out. The problem is that we tested it off the west coast of the United States, like right off Washington State, because that's where the guys who designed everything was. And that was a radically different seabed than Papua New Guinea. So it kept getting clogged up and we couldn't end up using it. We were worried actually that we were going to break our line because we had this giant spool in the back and it has to have enough rope to go down 6,000 feet and also then drag this thing behind the boat. And we're like, man, that's probably going to break with some snapback and kill somebody. We should probably not do that. So we ended up just using the magnetic sled instead. But we had a lot of fun with it. Like, the thing, where they had that soundtrack from it, dun 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 dun. So we made a little video, on Twitter of like the sled coming up in the middle of the night and like the thing song theme there, because we say, hey, you never know, it could be alien shit. And we never told Avi this, but my security detail and I, we said, look, if we actually find something alien, we had a whole protocol for how we were going to secure that and take it off the ship and take it to an undisclosed location to decide what to do with it. And only later did we tell Avi that we had it. We called it the touchdown protocol. And these were all like Green Berets that were with me. And I didn't have a SEAL at that time, but I really wish I had some Navy guys because the Berets didn't do as well on the boat as Billy would have done.
What do you think of all this alien stuff in the news? These anti-gravity propulsion systems. What do you think?
Well, it's hard to know what's true anymore because it could be a false flag thing where they're doing it to distract people or a propaganda thing. Or it maybe it's legit UAPs and they actually have these capabilities. Certainly the tapes are compelling. If you study aerospace engineering, it's like it's not possible to do the maneuvers that you're seeing with conventional propulsion. So there's some fundamental difference here with these things. And if you're an alien race, you got to think about what would they do. They would send robots, just like we would. We would send drones to a place. And so if you have it, you would first hide them in the sea because no one will discover them there. And 70% of the Earth is sea. So it's the obvious hiding spot to do it. And then, you would use them to observe things of significance. So observe nuclear weapons, observe the great powers, observe events. And then there would be some period that you would transmit information back. So it makes sense, from a common sense framework that, if there was an extraterrestrial surveilling the United States, that would be the approach that they would take. And then the other thing you'd like to understand is the capabilities of the species. Like, can you turn their nuclear weapons on and off? There's been some reports of issues like power outages at silos and things like that. And you'd also like to take samples. You'd like to understand what those species are and understand if they're a threat or friendly or, how they operate and what they do. So is it plausible? Of course. The challenge is, why is it not disclosed at this point if they do exist? What is the reason the government won't tell us the whole truth if they're fully aware of that truth? Either because the truth is horrifying and there's really bad things that are happening, or they don't know, in which case they're actually being honest and they're sharing what they do have, sans what they think they can't determine as an enemy capability versus what we have. Or it doesn't exist and they're actually doing this as a false flag thing to try to mess with us for some reason, to distract us from some other thing.
Why would they be doing that?
Who knows? It's like tradecraft, right? You pay attention to the left hand while the right hand's sliding in your back pocket. So you always do things in a certain way, in a certain structure based upon what your goals are. They could have killed bin Laden with a JDAM and they're just taking DNA samples. Instead, they had a daring raid. It was a Neptune Spear, and they sent special forces in a very, very dangerous mission that happened to be timed to happen exactly when Obama was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, when all of the press happened to be in Washington, D.C. And the end result was exactly the same. It was a kill mission. It was not a capture mission. So why do it that way? I don't know. Maybe the president had other objectives other than just killing a target, And so politicians do things and governments do things all the time to distract people and say things. And if one distraction is not working, then perhaps another distraction is going to work. The other thing is that there's a lot of weird top-shelf physics that we're starting to discover in the academic world. Like they froze light the other day. Now, I guess light's a solid. Who the fuck knew? And
what do you mean they froze light?
It's crazy, right? God knows how it works. They're doing it for memory modules for optical quantum computers and using crystals to like freeze light, and then they have time crystals and they have all this other crazy shit that they're coming up with. It's like the physics are so insane. So we're discovering things that are kind of like bending our conception of reality, whether it be quantum teleportation or, any of these things.
What is quantum teleportation?
It's basically where you move without going through a medium information from one point to another point. And it seems to be faster than the speed of light, and some physicists listening to this will cringe and say, well, actually, but basically you can move a message from A to B and it doesn't go through a medium. They just
talking quantum entanglement?
Yeah, they entangle and a message comes through.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.